Hey everybody, it's Blue,
and Delta.
and today we're going to give you guys a little video that kind of explains how we play some cards with the anime effect, and how we our whole system on card erratas and what that means.
So many of you, either returning to the channel or relatively new to the channel, will know that we play with changes to some cards so that they play more like the anime, and we call these erratas.
So in errata, the word in its kind of a simplified form refers to when something is printed. So, it could be books, magazines, or trading cards. And then the company that made it goes back and changes it because there was an error. So that would be an erratum. So when Konami has printed cards, they made a mistake, then they update it. They've also used that, though, to go back and change effects that they didn't like from previous cards. And it's, of course, what we use to change cards into what we prefer as a more anime-style effect.
So while Konami might issue an official errata, like a publisher does with a book, we are kind of using our own, you could say, custom or unofficial erratas. But for our purposes, we are changing card effect when we play it to be different than what is printed on the card.
And just like a lot of you guys know, and as you can see here, we'll always mark any one of our own custom errata cards with a white sticker. This makes it easy if it's a deck profile, if it's a duel, for it to stand out. So you as the viewers can easily identify a card that will not be played with the current printed text per Konami.
We also have an errata document linked in the description of our videos that lists all the erratas we use for easy reference.
We try not to read them all during the duel for pacing reasons. I'm sure sometimes that will be helpful, but that document is always accessible so you can get the full definitions and then follow along.
All right, so let's get into some of the specifics and details of our erratas. So Card of Sanctity is one of our first erratas and one of our most notable. And it's pretty obvious to many people who watch the anime why Card of Sanctity needs to be errata.
So this is one of the cases where we made a change because we felt that the printed official card just does not reflect its capability and its performance from the anime.
They are vastly different effects. They're not even all that similar in our minds. Card of Last Will, despite the fact that Konami put it cannot be used in a duel on it, they changed it somewhat, not a huge change, but they changed it somewhat from the anime, which does make it harder to use and give you less opportunities to actually use it. That does affect gameplay somewhat significantly, we felt like.
One of the things is we had a lot more erratas originally, and as we've come back, we tried to cut out a lot of them that we felt, didn't have as much of a payoff, or maybe just didn't quite really, weren't as game-changing as, other cards were.
So here's a couple examples of that. Magical hats we used to play with an errata. However, the errata just added a fourth hat, which was the card itself. Ultimately, that's a pretty small change, and while our errata was a little more accurate to the anime, that didn't make all that big of a difference. Durigato, it does have its own effect versus the anime, which is somewhat significant. But its effect to special itself out and increase attack is not game warping. It's not extremely distinctive or will be a huge factor in the outcome of your average duel with Marek's deck. So we used to have both of these errata, and now, for kind of different reasons, we felt like neither warrants an errata.
So we know that we had a lot of cards that, like Delta said, they had minor changes and, they offered something different. Ultimately, though, we did feel our list was extensive, and we did subjectively decide which ones, we could keep ones that are more game-changing, ones that we felt maybe we were just being a little bit nitpicky, we removed. So it has definitely offered a bit of a change to the tools that we have, and we're excited for it, though. We're excited to see, some cards like Magical Hats maybe now they're a little bit worse than they were before, and cards like Jurigator are now better than they were previously.
And that's just some of the variants that we're going to have. Flame Swordsman is an interesting example of cards that we errata because they're fusions for us, and there's just not really a practical way to use or play with them in a character's deck. And we ask ourselves, is Joey's deck and the experience of playing Joey's deck better and more like the anime if you're actually able to summon Flame Swordsman instead of just not being able to play it at all, or having to include cards you didn't play like Flame Manipulator? And the answer we arrive at is yes, it's a way better experience for us and for you guys to have Joey actually able to play a card like Flame Swordsman.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of these where it was a fusion in the TCG OCG anime. They just dropped it, and it makes things a little faster just to drop. Like let's say Flame Swordsman, you don't have to worry about getting the pieces, because especially as Joey's deck evolves throughout the seasons, making Flame Swordsman as a fusion becomes less and less appealing because he has stronger fusion monsters. So it's something else that kind of just gets you there without it being too costly. So Revival Jam is an example of when we kind of have an in-between anime erratum. So Revival Jam in the anime just respawn immediately, and the TCG OCG comes back on the standby phase at the cost of 1,000 life points,
and only when it's destroyed by battle.
So you really have a conflict between how the card functions in the actual card game versus how it was used in the anime, and ours is a mix between the two because we feel the anime has a bit too much anime, but the official card game one just completely neuters what it was useful for. So we have a bunch of ones too where it's somewhere in between. At our discretion, we try to find a balance.
And for us and many of you, this really does strike the balance between feeling more like the anime and feeling useful like the card was in the anime, but not feeling so overpowered or so unrealistic that the actual duels we're doing don't feel like actual duels. Ring of Destruction and Ring of Defense, both errata.
These each have a unique kind of example.
So Ring of Destruction was errata by Konami because they wanted to take it off the banned list, and it was a very powerful card, right? So they didn't make an error with printing its effect. They wanted to change how its effect worked. But that means they changed it away from its original effect, which was accurate to the anime.
So in a sense, this is a card where when we say we're using an erratum, we're really choosing the original effect as the card was originally printed.
Now, Ring of Defense is a little different example.
Ring of Defense, of course, was printed with an effect dissimilar from the anime and negates the purpose that it was used in the anime as a counterpart to Ring of Destruction. So as it was printed, you couldn't pull off the combo that Kaiba and then later Chaz used.
So while the text of Ring of Defense in its printed version may not be dramatically different from the anime effect, it's how it ends up being played and how this combo works that is dramatically different from the anime.
Yeah, this combo I think was a favorite of a lot of people, and so it was really disappointing when Ring of Defense was printed. It went in one direction, and then Ring of Defense got changed by Konami in another direction. So we pulled them back to that really cool 1-2 combo from the anime. And last but not least, some of the most errata cards, I think with need no introduction, are these three.
Naturally, when Konami tried to print the Egyptian god cards, they had much shorter, more scaled down, and generally not as powerful effects as the anime, where they had numerous effects, especially Ra, and the power level was just very, very high for these cards in the anime. Very different from the power level of the actual printed effects.
And if you look through for each of the Egyptian god cards, I mean, Konami has printed support cards for them. Ra has 2 other versions, the Sphere mode and then Immortal Phoenix. I mean, Ra is becoming almost like a mini archetype to kind of get all of its effects together. And while originally we had that, we found it just easier to give all the gods their effects, let them be as powerful as they're intended to be. And if it ends up, being game breaking for us, then so be it. That was the point of these.
Right. If they end up very powerful, almost impossible to beat, great. It feels like they're the actual cards that were played in the anime.
And also, of course, because we do play these with errata, it doesn't even matter that they're not the technically tournament legal copies of the cards. The color synced cards just make for a much better visual appearance. It matches the anime. So that's a nice thing too, is we don't need the tournament legal one with the effect. The blue obelisk just absolutely stands out in Kaiba's deck, and Slifer and Ra, just look really nice as well in their correct color.
So hopefully now you guys have a much better understanding of what we're thinking oftentimes and how we arrive at our erratas, why we've unerrated many cards versus years ago, and hopefully it just really helps you guys understand the picture that we have in our heads.
Overall, we've definitely seen a lot of feedback from you guys over the years that you like the way we play it. I think just in a general consensus, if you've watched the anime and you play the card game, there's a discrepancy. And so that was a lot of our motivation, was just to bridge that a little bit. To do every card with the anime effect would be a lot, and we feel like it would get confusing after a while. So we try to be selective and balance it out. But I definitely think it goes without saying that there were cool things in the anime that, without fudging the rules, you just couldn't do in the card game.
So we'll still have our next video Friday. Look forward to that. And as always, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know every time we have a new upload. And why enjoy anime games? Out.